I am going to figure this out or I'm going to close the business down.
He gets so excited.
And you realize our net worth is over $1 million.
His business name is going to be Laundromat Millionaire. I was like, no.
Elevate the industry. If you want it bad enough, nothing will stop you.
I want to hear kind of Dave's end of the story for a second and hear what it was like after you closed, what happened and what that experience was like and what you did with this zombie mat, to turn it around. And then I want to go back and hear, okay, what was really happening behind the scenes,
what was life like?
For you as you're working full time and running this laundromat. So tell us what that was like after you closed.
So we closed on the laundromat and I had taken the day off of work. She was on maternity leave. We signed the papers. We left. We obviously met the previous owner at the closing. And our agreement was when we got done signing the papers, he obviously got his check. He would follow us back to the store and give us the whole, the bucket of keys and all the craziness that comes with a coin laundry. And he would kind of, spend a few hours kind of showing me the basics of, how to open a change machine and just silly stuff. That was kind of our agreement. And so we left there. She was once again, just had a baby 2 weeks ago, had a newborn at home, the whole 9 yards. So we left and I dropped her off at home and I literally pulled in the driveway. She got out and went inside and I backed out and I left. And I went up to the laundromat and I met the previous owner up there and we walk inside. Short of maybe my children being born and my wedding day, I'm not sure I've ever been more excited in my life. And I'm just like, the only thing I knew was this is mine. It may be a hot mess, but it's my hot mess. And once again, I had confidence that I could do something with it. And so I spent a few hours with the owner. I had made arrangements. Once again, I had already met and kind of built a relationship with an equipment distributor that knew the business inside and out. And I had made arrangements for him, the owner of the distributorship, to meet me at the store the next day. So I took the next day off work too. But after the owner left the day of closing, I was up there till 10 o'clock at night. And I was cleaning and wiping off and talking to customers. And I didn't know how to fix washers and dryers, but I was trying to fix doorknobs and anything I could fix. He walked out of there and I wasn't 5 minutes later, I had a screwdriver in my hand and I was like, what can I do and how fast can I do it? Mm-hmm. And I had already arranged to have a few contractors meet me up there. We didn't have a lot of money, but we had a little, and okay, let's do this and let's paint the place and put a TV up and some real low-lying fruit type of modifications. The next day I met my distributor up there. He had two of his best service technicians meet me there. And I told him by the end of the day, I want everything in here working. I don't care what it costs. Just send me the bill. And we got most of the stuff working that day. They were rock stars. They got almost everything in there working. And we left and we had cleaned it up. And I would go there for the next several months. I would go there before work. It was open 24 hours a day and spend an hour or two cleaning the laundromat from the night before. And this was, I worked at 7 a.m. and I had an hour commute. So I had to leave my laundromat by 6 a.m. to get to work. And so I would probably go up there about 4:30 a.m. most days, most mornings, and clean up for an hour or so and then leave and go to work. And I would work all day. And I had a very physically demanding job. It was a blue collar job. I was a lineman for the local phone company. Whether it was cold or hot outside, I was out in the elements, climbing telephone poles and fixing phone lines. And you leave a job like that after 8 hours, you are whipped beyond belief every single day. And I would leave there and I would go straight to my laundromat and I would work until I couldn't stand up anymore. Just anything I could do, clean it off, garbage on the windows. And I would, buy new laundry carts and then I would be up there till midnight putting them together, by myself. Because if we didn't have babies at home, my wife, she would not have wanted to be there, but she would have been there helping me do these things. But it wasn't an option. She had to be at home with the babies and her parents stepped up a lot and helped out. And our daughter was a godsend because she was just the best big sister in the world. That's something we probably, didn't really appreciate. I know we appreciate it a little bit, but probably not to the level we do nowadays of even the sacrifice that my daughter made with me basically being gone. So for the next 4 or 5 months, that was essentially our life. I worked and I slept. And we got to the point where slowly but surely, all this stuff I was doing started to pay off. And we weren't doing any marketing or anything. It was all word of mouth. But just fixing the machines, painting it up, cleaning it up, things like that, slowly started to turn around. And after 6 months or so, we had went from, I want to say roughly $1,300 a week is what it did when we bought it, to probably close to double that, close to 26, maybe even close to 3,000 a week in a very short period of time. And so I felt like kind of level one of my goals was accomplished. I was like, this place is now making money. And it wasn't making a lot of money, but at the end of the month, we had our expenses and we had our revenue, and there was more revenue than there was expenses. And at one point, that wasn't barely, I mean, by maybe like $1,000. But I remember even thinking to myself at one point, our mortgage at the time was like $1,100 a month on our personal residence. And I just remember thinking at one point, well, if nothing else, this side business that runs while I'm asleep and runs while I'm at work, and I won't always have to put in the hours I put in recently because we had fixed it up quite a bit. And I thought, well, if nothing else, it pays my house payment. Like, who at 33 years old wouldn't want to just not have a house payment, basically? Like, that's, once again, everything's relative in life, and financially, where I come from, if you got a house that's paid for, you are a multimillionaire as far as I'm concerned. In Flint, Michigan, if you got a paid for house, you might as well be a billionaire. And so I just thought, well, if nothing else, we were paying our note payment for the SBA, and we were left with a little bit left over. And I thought, well, after 4 or 5 years of paying this payment, the note will be paid off, and then we'll be making a few thousand a month. And that's if it never does any more. And so I was by no means happy, or by no means finished, but I was happy with the short-term results. I felt like I was on the right track. And so from there, I started digging in and researching, reading on finding another one. I was kind of out of money, so I wanted to do more with my existing store. I just didn't have the money or resources to do it. And I started looking for another location, and my equipment distributor, who's been in this business for 40 years, he tries to kind of pull back the reins. He's like, well, slow down. What little you had is all in that business. You can't go get another one. I've never been a very good listener. I just don't listen to people. I didn't listen to my parents. I don't listen to my wife. I have ideas, and I respect people and I love people and I will discuss it. But if I believe this is the best thing for my family, like, watch out. And I don't mean that to sound disrespectful, because obviously if she was against it, I wouldn't do anything. But you better have a real story to tell to incentivize me to back off.
I'm pretty laid back.
Yeah, she has a very laid back personality, and I have a pretty aggressive personality, especially as far as ambition. And I think it does go. I hope it goes a little bit back to just the fact that she has some confidence, at least in my effort, if nothing else. Like, I will put the effort in, and it may not work, but it won't be because of lack of effort. And so, long story short, we ended up, after 7, 8, 9 months, finding another local laundromat for sale, or not for sale. It was actually out of business. It had been closed for about a year.
It was our free laundromat.
Right.
Okay,
Exactly.
hold on. I need to pause for a second, okay? Because we're starting
dropping
to
all this terminology here.
I know, man.
I'm
Look
learning
at
so
you
much
go.
from your all's Q&As.
Look at you go. Okay, but I need to pause you because we're starting to collect laundromats now, but we haven't heard the other side of the
So
story.
what's going on back at home?
Because I want to know how you got to, being at that closing, being like, man, I really don't want this, to, okay, we can get a second one. All right. Because I know a lot happened between that. So what was life like for you as the
Gordon,
spouse of Dave Menz?
It's been a roller coaster, and I always say I'm just along for the ride. So we had a 2-week-old. We closed. We had a 2-week-old, a 2.5-year-old, and a 12-year-old at home, and he was basically gone all the time. I leaned a lot on friends and family, and probably complained a decent amount about being a single parent because I pretty much was, to be honest. He was working all the time, and I was at first on maternity leave too. So I had the baby and the toddler and stuff at home with me, but he was at work, and there would be things would come up, and he'd be like, oh, can you go run this check over? So I was actually with the toddler and the newborn in tow, driving by the laundromat all the time during the day, because I was
one that
at
you
home
didn't feel
maternity
safe to
leave.
go to.
Yes,
right?
yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes, well, it was at least
With
being
her
gutted,
babies.
and there was a contractor that I had met and knew. So yeah, I was taking my babies to the shady laundromat to pay the contractor. And then also, with my background having been in accounting, that was one deal I made with him. I was, if you're going to start a business, then I can at least do the bookkeeping, which saves us some money, because though I was a teacher, I did have a degree in accounting. So I might have been a little rusty, but I could do that kind of basic stuff. So I was with the kids, being a single parent, and every weekend I was catching up the bookkeeping. Yeah, it was crazy. Remember that first Christmas of that first year?
Tell us the story.
So we did eventually take over this quote unquote free laundromat that we basically signed a lease on. It was closed to the public. We take over this laundromat, and it was in way worse shape. It was closed completely than the first one, and we had basically no resources. I mean, you talk about sweat equity. I'm like selling my blood to get $5 to buy a nail. Like, maybe not quite that bad, but pretty bad. We maxed out our credit cards, everything you can imagine. And when we took over, we signed a lease, we took over, they agreed to charge us no rent until we opened it up. And this was in roughly October, I think. And so I knew the only way I was ever going to get this thing open was to do the work myself, pull from every resource I could under the sun, every favor I could call in from anybody, anybody that had a paintbrush. Like, I don't care if you give me 5 minutes, I'll take it. Like every favor I could imagine. And all I knew is I just had the opportunity to get this for free, where this previous one, I mean, it was not quite as bad a shape, but it really wasn't a whole lot different. And I had paid 80 grand for that one. So I was just like, well, I mean, I feel like I have equity in this walking in. If I could make that work, how can I not make this work? And it was roughly 15 or 20 minutes away. So a lot of the research and due diligence I had done for my first store kind of applied to the market for this one as well. And so once again, like, it was definitely a better opportunity than the first one. And I just, again, could not pass it up. And I had no idea how I was going to pull this off financially. The one caveat we had that we weren't willing to do was borrow money from friends and family. I mean, we were willing to max out our credit card, sell everything in our home, whatever I was. But
Not about everything.
But sell our car and buy a beater, ride a bike to work, whatever. There just wasn't anything that was going to stop me. I spent the next few months, I'd gotten my first store semi running pretty well. I had hired someone local as a contractor that would come in and clean a few hours a day.
The first store was finally profitable.
Right.
I say it was profitable, but one thing too, these first few years is we took nothing. None of that profit came out of the business. Like everything was reinvested back in. Early on, I can remember doing the books, and like it'd be on Saturday and be like, okay, I need to do all the bills. It'd be like, so which bills should we pay? I think this one can wait another week. Like, it was tight.
It was literally like, if I don't pay this bill, are they going to turn off the lights? No.
I'm like,
Okay,
no, I think I got another week for they'll turn the lights off. So, I mean, it was
I did
tight.
the same stuff. Yeah.
But we were still living on our incomes from our normal jobs.
Right.
And honestly, even some of that money was going towards the laundromats. The fact that the first one was profitable gave us some money to help with the second one. And it helped build my trust in that, okay, he can do this. He's flipped one, he can do this. Because the second one was a dump too. Like, it had to be totally gutted.
It was bad. So my point of this is I'm in the middle of just gutting the second one with less resources than I had on the first one. I mean, every penny the Amelia store made, our first store, was spent on materials for this other store. And every penny we didn't need to pay our bills because we were still living below our means personally was gone the day we got paid. I mean, we had never lived paycheck to paycheck, but we pretty much were, just basically because we were putting everything we could in this business. And the rest came from sweat, work. And once again, she's at home with a 6-month-old and a 3-year-old. I literally did this, and so did she, for months. And I didn't even care what day of the week it was. I was getting up early and I was working until I couldn't stand anymore, including the weekends. It was just a matter of where I was going. And I did that for months. I woke up Christmas morning at 4 a.m. and I got in the shower and I got a shower and I got out. And as I'm walking out of the shower, she rolls over in bed, half groggy asleep. And she looks at me and she says, "What are you doing?" And I said, what do you mean what I'm doing? I'm going to work. She goes, "It's Christmas. What's wrong with you?" And just rolled back over and covered herself back up. That was all she said. And I honestly don't know if she remembered it that day. She was probably half asleep. And I remember just feeling like the worst husband and dad on the planet that morning, because I was like, I had no idea it was Christmas Day. I mean, I had went a whole month, so I knew it was Christmas time. You don't miss the tree and stuff. But I mean, I had put up a tree. I had bought a present. I had wrapped a present. I literally did not know it was Christmas Day. Even Christmas Eve, I had probably worked until midnight, until I couldn't stand anymore. And so that, I don't wear that as a badge of honor. I don't tell that story in a bragging sense. I tell it in a sense of that's where I came from, personally. And that's where we were financially to make this dream, supposedly, dream happen. And these are pretty extreme scenarios, but you talk to a lot, not all, but a lot of business owners and entrepreneurs, especially small business owners, and they have very similar and sometimes crazier stories to tell. But I felt, once again, I take tremendous pride in the fact that I try to be a good husband and try to be a good father. And the reason I was able to do these things and make all these crazy sacrifices is because I knew I had a good woman at home taking care of my babies. And I knew that we had a support system that if she needed help, they would be there for her. It didn't have to be me. And that happened many times where she would call on her parents and my parents, and once again, our daughter who was a little older, and friends and stuff like that. And, everybody was chipping in behind the scenes. I stood there that day and I just felt like an absolute horrible person. And I laid back down in bed and I couldn't even go back to sleep, even though I was just exhausted. I couldn't go back to sleep just out of complete and utter guilt of how I felt.
Well, we used to say that our youngest son, so that was born the same time our laundromat business was born, basically the first 3 years of his life was when Dave was still working full time and doing the laundromats after work. I mean, we would say it somewhat jokingly, but not, because it's kind of sad, but he didn't hardly know his dad. The kids were with me all the time, and dad was someone that they would see coming in and out.
I would come in, I would eat a sandwich, and I would fall asleep eating it sometimes.
Yeah.
And I would, if I was awake for a half an hour, I probably wasn't a real great guy, to be honest.
Well, and you were probably on your phone
exhausted.
taking calls
True.
from customers.
True. And I've even heard my daughter tell stories, because she was older. I've heard her tell stories. She's now 22 and married. And I've heard her tell stories of basically her entire childhood. Her dad was on the phone.
Yeah.
And it wasn't because I was, chit-chatting with my buddy. It was because I was working. Even when I was at my laundromats, there was more than one time where I had my phone on speaker sitting on a chair next to me while I'm physically working with my hands. I don't know that we had Bluetooth and stuff back then, because I couldn't not do either one. I had to take the phone call, but I had to make every minute count. I had to be productive every minute of every day.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you shared those stories, because I think, when people hear Laundromat Millionaire, they have an image that comes into their mind. Right. And I think this is true of pretty much all successful entrepreneurs, at least, where you see on the back end, the quote unquote glamorous side of things, but on the front end, we don't get to peel back the curtain for too many people and see that, oh my gosh, like he had times where he didn't even know it was Christmas Day. Right. And he basically didn't see his kids for 3 years. And, all the hours and the work and the falling asleep, eating a sandwich, and the up at 4:30, home at 10, just in time to fall into bed stories. Like we don't get to hear that part of the story very often. So I appreciate you guys sharing that. And I'm sure not only were you working yourself to death, really, but Carla, I'm sure for you were probably doing the exact same, on the other side.
Yeah, it was insane, because at first I was on maternity leave, but then I eventually, had to go back to work. So I had the newborn, I had the 2-year-old, and I was working an hour away. I was purposely doing that so my mom could watch the boys for me. So I would leave the house by 6 a.m. so I could get to my job an hour away, drop the boys off to my mom, work all day, pick the boys back up, hurry home, because I had my 12-year-old stepdaughter, that we ended up getting custody of. So we had her full time too. And I had to help her with her homework while I had the kids. And then once she was done with her homework and the boys were fed, then I had to grade papers and do lesson plans. And there's also the business bookkeeping, but I pushed it off to the weekend. So basically all week was just like crazy nonstop, taking care of the kids and the family, because Dave wasn't there. He was, at the laundromats working. So I was really kind of a single mom. I was a single mom with an hour commute each way, and I had bookkeeping to do on my weekends. It was insane. So it was definitely a sacrifice. Those 3 years were a huge sacrifice for both of us, but we had the dream in mind that this was a temporary thing, that this wasn't our new life forever, but this was the sacrifices we needed to make this a successful business. And those first 3 years, it wasn't just that first year, but those first 3 years, we literally took nothing out of the business. Everything that we made was reinvested, along with savings we could make from our own salaries. So it was constantly reinvesting in that business to help it grow, because we had the long-term goal in mind of, we've got to get this business to the point where it can support Dave leaving his job, so that life isn't like this anymore. And luckily the boys were young enough, they don't even remember it being like that. My daughter, unfortunately, does. But hopefully that was a model of, hey, you can work hard and achieve things, because she does see the success, that our businesses and we have now. So she does have that model of hard work. But 3 years, it was crazy. And then right after the third laundromat location is where we got the businesses to a point. Dave and I talked about it, and he's like, I think we're to a point where the businesses are profitable, and I think we can take enough out of the business to cover my salary, cover his salary, because he's saying it to me. So it was 3.5 years into being in the laundromat business. We were finally to a point like, okay, let's finally let these businesses help our lives, And even then, we took out the exact amount of what his paycheck would have been had he still been working at the phone company. And that's all we took from the business, was basically just get us at the same level of living for us and let the business pay him enough to keep us at that same level. And everything above that was reinvesting into the business.
Yeah, so we found this. I had actually been working on trying to acquire this third laundromat. That was a great location. I had been working on it and talking to the owner about it, trying to get him to sell for a good year and a half. If he had sold early on, I honestly don't know how we would have done it, because it wasn't in great shape, but it was in much better shape than the other two. It was, most people would still consider it a zombie mat. It just wasn't like dead like the other two were. They weren't zombies. They were literally
It was
dead.
at least like in a location that didn't seem as shady. It was like, well lit.
Yeah, a good location, but it was very, very run down and very poor shape. As she said, 2 weeks before we closed on it, I made the decision to quit my job. And I estimate in that 3.5, 4 years, whatever it was, I basically worked and slept. I mean, that was literally my life. There might have been, a rare occasion where I took an hour or two off and went out to dinner with some friends. But other than that, I worked and slept, and I pushed myself beyond where I would recommend people to push themselves. So that's why I said I don't wear this as a badge of honor by any stretch of the imagination. But I think a big part of what we want to do with hosting this new podcast is we want people to understand our backstory. We don't want to just tell the good side of all the money we make and, nice cars and stuff like that, which is certainly part of the story for sure. But there was absolutely a tremendous short-term sacrifice. And she talked about it being very intentional. We weren't unaware of what we were doing when we were making these sacrifices, me and her. We talked about it many times, and I'm sure many times it probably wasn't a real fun conversation. Probably never was, especially for her, because it's one thing for it to be your dream and you to be doing what you're doing and seeing your family go through what your family going through, including your wife and children, and knowing that you're missing out on years of your children's life that is precious, priceless, and you cannot get back. It's a sacrifice. It's not like, well, I'll sacrifice a nice car for 5 years, but then I'm going to get a nice car. You miss those years of your life and you will never get them back. I knew it then, and I wasn't, I shouldn't say I wasn't okay with it, because clearly I was. It was a tremendous acceptable sacrifice. And when I say short term, to tell the story, I mean, 3.5, 4 years, it doesn't really sound like that long of a time frame.
That's a long time.
But when you're living it every single day, every weekend, it'll mentally break you. I mean, there's just no other way to put it. And the guilt I felt wasn't so much about me and, the sacrifices I was willing to make, because this was my dream. The guilt that I felt was more about my wife, because this wasn't her dream. I knew she was just doing this to support me. And I knew I had to have that support. I had to have her by my side to do this. And I wouldn't have done it. Like I said, I joke, but I wouldn't have done it without her willingness. I wouldn't say approval, but willingness. And even my children, I felt bad, guilty at the time, and I still to this day feel guilty that they didn't get a say in that. They didn't get to decide if they basically didn't get to see their dad for 3.5 years. We didn't take a vote. That was just their childhood. That was just their life.
They do think it's pretty cool that their dad's a Laundromat Millionaire now, though.
I bet they do. Yeah, I think it's pretty cool.
No, that's cool.
So I don't want to insinuate that we just like tripped and did this accidentally. It was all very intentional. But
he warned me on the first date.
I did.
He warned you.
I'm a lot of things, but I am transparent. I am very honest with people, probably to a fault. But anyway, so back to the story. Yeah, so we ended up acquiring our third store, and like she said, a couple of weeks prior, I quit my job. That sounds like, oh man, you made it kind of situation, but the reality is, like, now I didn't have to work 90, 100 hours a week. I could work like 50 or 60 hours a week, which is like a vacation. For me and her both, because I was actually home. I was around some. I wasn't always tired. We could, I could work. I could get up early in the morning and work till 6 or 7 o'clock at night, but still have 2 or 3 hours with my family.
Another thing is when he left his job that freed me up to not need my mom for childcare anymore.
Right.
So, those first 3 years that one of our sons didn't ever see his father, our youngest, he actually got to spend time with his dad. I mean, they had preschool and like part-time kindergarten, our two sons, because they were almost 4 and 6 at the time. So they got to go to work with dad to the laundromats every day. And it kind of helped make up for those first 3 years, and that they got that time to bond with their dad, going to work with him and being in the laundromat and kind of seeing the family business and helping in the family business. So that was good.
I would take our older son, we would take him to kindergarten. Me and my younger son would take him to kindergarten and drop him off after I left my job. And me and my younger one every morning would go out to what we call brunch, but it was like 7:30 in the morning. And it would just be me and him. And we would just have brunch, and we would go to the same place almost every day. And they all knew him. And it was just a bunch of old people in there and this little cute 4-year-old. And he was just the talk of the town. And we would have breakfast really for 45 minutes to an hour. And then I called him my laundromat buddy. There was nowhere else for him to go. He was with me every second of every day. He would help me collect quarters. He would hand me tools. And he loved it because that's his personality. He loves to be a helper. Not all kids do. And so that's, the good side of it is, aside from the monetary things and discussions like that, the reality is I made a tremendous sacrifice. We made a tremendous sacrifice to get to that point. And there was still way more, plenty of work to do. Don't get me wrong. But the reward for me wasn't quitting my job, although I was miserable in my job. So that was absolutely phenomenal to be able to do that. But the biggest reward for me is there aren't too many dads at any point in their life where they can say they spent 1.5 years straight with their 4-year-old. I mean, there's not too many dads that are in that kind of situation. I made a tremendous sacrifice. Luckily, he was young enough that he doesn't remember it. It didn't traumatize him or anything. It might have traumatized me, but it didn't traumatize him. But the reality is that, the flip side of that was that I got, 1.5 years is a pretty long time to once again get to spend all day, every day with your dad. And he does remember those times. He does remember eating breakfast at the local restaurant. And he does, I would let him choose the restaurant some days. And he does remember helping me collect. And they still do those things on a small basis, but it was a lifestyle until he started kindergarten. And even in kindergarten, he wasn't, I don't think he was in school all day, every day. Yeah, half day. So the same thing. I had the schedule flexibility where I would drop him off at school. I would pick him up at noon, and he would be my laundromat buddy for the second half of the day until, everybody else got off school and off work and stuff. So then we kind of doubled down and said, well, wow, we can look at this and we can say we've arrived. Another goal,
We could have stopped there, but he doesn't know how to stop.
It's never been a strong suit.
Not been a strong suit, no. Honestly, it just opened up more opportunities. Like now he no longer was confined by the amount of hours he had after his day job. That's when we started adding the drop-off laundry as another income stream. We started getting vending machines as another income stream. And then you started looking at a 4th location.
That's right. Yeah, when we acquired our 3rd store, it had a drop-off laundry service in it that was very, very poorly run. I had to make a decision really before we closed on it of, okay, when I close, am I going to continue to run this and fix it and make it, what I consider a premier professional drop-off service? Or am I going to just shut it down and just be the other 2 stores were unattended. We had some people that cleaned it, so I didn't need to be there. They were what you would describe as a semi-passive business, and they were both profitable at that point. And we had done that for 3 years or so. So, we did have a little bit of money squirreled away, and we had some monthly income coming in, and still had, once again, we replaced my income from my job with a salary from the business. So we personally weren't in any different situation. We ultimately just decided to dive in head first into the wash, dry, fold thing. And one of the reasons for that was we had made the decision at that point that we wanted to pivot our business model from being unattended to having attendance in the store. And so that's when we made the decision to, okay, well, I'm full time. I can manage these people. I can interview them. I can train them. If they need to be disciplined, I can discipline them.
He can cover if they don't show up.
If the shift need to be covered, I can cover because I can't do that if I'm climbing a telephone pole. And that's when we looked at, okay, where can we get revenue? Where can we get revenue? And she mentioned we had contracted out vending machines. So we bought vending machines. But now I could go to Sam's Club and buy what was needed to stock the vending machines. And if they broke, I had the time to figure out how to fix the vending machines. And so we just pivoted our business model at that time and got a little bit of our life back. And that really, me quitting my job. When I say I went from working 90 to 100 hours a week to roughly 50 or 60 hours a week, the things people have to remember is, but during that transition, I went from probably only working 20 to 30 hours a week in my businesses because I had my full-time job and commute, to now working 50 to 60 hours a week in my businesses. And so when you make that commitment and you step up to that level, you should, if you're making good decisions, you should see results from that. And that was really when our business just kind of took off like a rocket ship. And we added the revenue streams. People that don't know the laundromat industry, if you convert from an unattended store to an attended store, and it doesn't happen overnight, but if it's done well and you hire good people and you hire them and train them well, you'll see a pretty substantial increase in your revenue, in your gross revenue, by going from unattended to attended. And so it doesn't always cover all of the expenses of payroll, but it a lot of times covers a lot of it. And then you got the vending helps chip in, and then drop off laundry helps chip in. And next thing you know, you actually have attendants on duty who can help take care of the store. They just call you if they need something, but you're making the same amount of money, or maybe even a little bit more at one point. We probably were. And so then we went back to our second store and added the drop-off laundry service to that store and made that store attended. And then we realized we kind of, it was intentional, but we just kind of pivoted our business model from kind of one side of the laundromat industry, which is a more plain Jane basic business model, being unattended, open 24 hours, things like that, to being on the other side of it, where we're really in the middle, I guess, where we had attendants on duty and things like that. And so that was a big transition point for us. And our businesses really took off to a different level. And that's when I really kind of caught the bug that, okay, at one point I thought the epitome of success in a small business was quitting my job and doing this full time. And I call that owning a job. I had to be in my businesses, one of them, all day, every day. I had to be managing employees. I was the one doing interviewing and training and stocking and inventorying and all these things. And then I realized, well, but I'm only, I don't know what I was, 37 probably years old. And I thought, well, my goodness, now I have all the time in the world. What if I just keep going? And so we bought it, and we felt like we had a pretty polished business model at this point. We knew how to buy an old rundown laundromat. We knew how to find good locations. We knew how to find good people. We knew how to renovate them. And we had a great relationship with our distributor at this point. And so we felt like we had a pretty solid team in place of even plumbers and electricians and contractors. And we knew who to call and when to call them. And they just send us the bill and we just pay it. And it really changed our lifestyle, even though I was still working a lot of hours. And so I just decided, okay, well, I can just stop, like she said, and just kind of keep doing what I'm doing. And, any one day I can pretty much do whatever I want, but I still got to go to work and be productive. And I'll basically always have replaced my job. I'll have a new job. And that's what I call self-employed. But I decided I wanted to keep going. I wanted to keep growing the business. You mentioned earlier changing my family tree. It had never occurred to me before that I could have an opportunity like that. And I couldn't help but look at my age and look at the support system around me and the education. Because once again, as she described, I'd been reading and watching videos and magazines and everything for years before we bought our first business. But I still did a lot of those things. I would just listen to podcasts while I was driving, and I never wasted a minute. If I went to the doctor and I was sitting in the doctor's office and I had 10 minutes waiting on the doctor, I was reading something. I had a book with me or something, trying to increase my financial education and my business acumen. And you do that every day for, probably 7 or 8 years, and your education's a lot better. And I looked and said, well, man, I'm roughly 37, 38 years old. I got my whole world in front of me, and I have this incredible foundation. And so we started looking for another location. And at this point, once again, back to the bankruptcy, my credit had been repaired. Our credit was phenomenal. We had a decent nest egg in the bank. We had replaced my income so I could do full time in the business. And I had learned how to run a business, and I had built a mini team of store attendants, and I had brought on a store manager that would help me do some training and things like that. And she was a rock star. I just saw the sky was the limit. Like, I'm not arrived. I'm just getting started. And so we ended up acquiring a fourth store in a great location. It was also really run down. And at this point, we had, great credit and a great business, so we could leverage the equity in the businesses. We could basically just gut this laundromat, and it was our biggest store. It was 5,400 square feet. And we could gut this store and basically put all new brand new equipment in it within 3 months of buying it. And we put a new floor in and a new ceiling and new lights. And I mean, we had done all these things, but it was over micro projects over time at our other stores. In this store, we could take our education and our ability to leverage and our equity and our credit and things like that and just bam, just do it all at once. And this store, the laundromat's really only about 3,500 square feet. It has a lot of like excess storage space and stuff like that. And we looked at this store and thought, what are we going to do with this space? This is just, I mean, all this wasted space I'm paying rent for. It's crazy.
Had we bought it before you went to the clean show? Remember the clean show where you had your epiphany?
Yeah.
Was that before we bought it?
We had bought it shortly before that. Yeah. And so what she's referring to, those of you that aren't in our industry, the laundromat industry, what she's referring to is our every other year we have a trade show called the Clean Show. And it's a trade show that's basically a combination of the dry cleaning industry and the laundromat industry and everything that you would think a trade show is. So all these booths and products and services and so on and so forth. And I go to the Clean Show and I'm just looking for anything I can to make my business better. We now have 4 stores. They're all 4 profitable. I have a manager in place. I think we'd even talked about at this point, maybe finding another manager and having like each of them run 2 stores kind of thing. And I was just looking for any angle I could to improve my business and take it to the next level.
We were thinking we would maybe try to grow the drop-off laundry because we had that huge area in that 4th location. We're like, oh, we could store a lot of drop-off here. Maybe there's something where we can grow that business.
Yeah, I mean, we were really open to any ideas at that point. We were just not content. We were not comfortable. We wanted to keep going. And that's when I said I saw the opportunity to just change the family tree. So at the Clean Show, I met with some vendors and stuff like that. And one of them I talked to had built some software for pickup, supporting a pickup and delivery laundry service, which is exactly what it sounds like. It's a wash, dry, fold, type of service, but you add a logistics component to it. I spent 4 or 5 hours in the booth that day with that guy. I mean, talk about being obsessed. I latched on and people came and went for 4 or 5 hours and I did not move because all I knew is everything he kept saying I wanted to hear and I wanted to ask more and more questions. There was a few other booths that were people doing those same things with other software products and I talked to them as well. And I did quite a bit of research over a few days. And when I got to the Clean Show, I never dreamed in a million years that I would do pickup and delivery. And when I left the Clean Show, I was sitting in the airport and I called my general manager and I said, I know what we're doing next and it ain't buying a 5th store. We're going to start a pickup and delivery business. And my general manager, she's a grinder. She's a rock star in every way. And one of the things that makes her great is much like my wife, Carla, Marlene is her name. One of the things that makes her a rock star is she will just go with my craziness.
Like, all right,
and she's like,
tell me what we need to do.
I said, this is what we're doing. And I mean, I'm on top of cloud 9 and I'm this excitement she describes. Marlene hears these things. I'm like, this is what we're doing and it's going to be great. And it's going to this and and she's like, all right, you're freaking crazy, dude. And so that was kind of our next venture. We took on the pickup and delivery angle of the business and decided to create, what we considered at that point. We bought a van and decided to create what we thought would be an ancillary income, another small revenue stream that would complement our business and just bring in a little bit more revenue. And at that point, we thought we would do that and have a van, maybe 2.
Tell us, how did that turn out for you? Was it a nice little ancillary income or what did that do for you guys, for your business?
Well, the situation was that we launched this and it was a great idea, as many small businesses are, but we had no idea what we were doing. We had no support system, no mentors, nothing. It was just like winging it.
It's a new service. I mean, pickup and delivery laundry hasn't been around a long time. It's a great idea, but it's hard because you have to teach your customers what it is. Like, because I would talk to friends that we were starting pickup and delivery and they're like, you mean like dry cleaning? No, we're not doing dry cleaning, like your regular laundry. We'll pick it up and deliver it to you the next day. Oh,
And we found out years later, because we obviously had some success with it, but we found out years later that all of our friends, one of the reasons that, I had already decided to do it. And I'd ran it by Carla and she was like, whatever. And I'd ran it by Marlene and she was like, whatever. And so I decided I was going to do this.
so supportive.
Yeah.
Not that it mattered anyways. You were going to do it.
That's true. But, I also ran it by all my friends and a lot of them are entrepreneurs and a lot of them aren't entrepreneurs, just that mindset. And everybody that I ran this idea back, they were like, wow, that's a great idea. My friends, and I'll come back to the
came
story.
up with it. Of course, it's a great idea.
Turns out I found out a few years later after we experienced pretty tremendous success with pickup and delivery, every single one of them lied right to my face. And they've all admitted it now. Every one of them thought I was absolutely insane. They thought it was the stupidest idea they had ever heard in their lives, but none of them were going to tell me that. and it wouldn't have mattered. I'll fully admit that it would not have mattered, but it did give me, a different level of courage to chase it that everybody had. I respected these people, and everybody I talked to was like, wow, that's genius. Like, that's a great idea. I thought, well, good. It's a little confirmation because these are people I respect. Turns out every one of they right. Yeah, they all a bunch of liars. It's really not a sexy story, to be honest, because really the story goes that for the next 2 years, we lost our shirts. I mean, we invested, literally, we probably lost 6 figures a couple years in a row, trying to scale and grow this business. And we had substantial businesses at this point. I was still pretty much living off just my salary. We hadn't changed our lifestyle or anything like that, but our businesses were making significantly more money, all the stores. And so we had a lot of disposable income that we just kind of left in our businesses. And so I said, I launched this business. I thought it would be kind of small. Within 6 months, we just exploded with customers. We were losing money because we were inefficient, but we exploded with business and customers. And I realized the opportunity here is way bigger than I ever dreamed. I always say it was kind of perfectly positioned with like this shift in our society's mindset of like full service, everything to your door. Mm-hmm. And we just launched right about that same time. Society was just ready for it. It's just that simple.
The same time as Uber and Grubhub and DoorDash and
everybody wants everything delivered. Same kind of situation. But we were small potatoes and we didn't have a clue what we were doing. I didn't think it'd be a separate business. I just thought it would be an ancillary income. And so anyway, long story short, a couple years went by and I realized the opportunity was huge. And for the next couple of years, I didn't care if we made any money. I was going to throw everything but the kitchen sink at this business to scale it. That was the only thing I cared about was market share. My wife, meantime, all this revenue's coming in, all this revenue's going back out. Mm-hmm. And she just, every month, she just keeps her mouth quiet. She pays the bills. And finally, I was probably 18 months, maybe 24 months in. The business was substantial. But I mean, we were like pickup and delivery. Let's say we were making $20,000 a month, but she's a bookkeeper. And so she looks and she's like, every month it's getting harder to pay the bills. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, how is this? The only thing I was focused on was market share. I did not care if we made any money.
The business was growing, just the profits weren't.
The profits were going down. Right. We were hemorrhaging.
It's accountant's worst nightmare.
Right. We were hemorrhaging money. I'm sure it had been going on for months. I know it had been. And finally, she just got fed up one day that she was having trouble paying the bills. And this was ridiculous. Mm-hmm. And she just kind of lost it on me. I mean, it was eye-opening. I was stunned. I was like, how is that possible? How is it possible that we're struggling to pay our bills more now than ever, but we have this substantial, at least gross revenue business? How is that possible?
So I printed off the data.
Yeah, that's right.
I was like, well, here's how.
Yep. And she said, you know what? I'll show you how. And she sat down and showed me. And I sat there stunned, completely stunned, because I was very proud of what I had accomplished. Our team, when we had a substantial team at this point. And I was very proud of it. And she basically said, you keep going at this pace, like stop growing the business because we're going backwards. Like quit
growing us into bankruptcy.
And so me and my general manager, Marlene, we had worked hard to build the business, but we hadn't really focused on efficiencies and profit margins and things like that. And I said, all right, this is crazy. How can this thing be bringing in $20,000 or $25,000 a month and not make any money, even if it's just a few thousand? And I started drilling down and I realized we were losing our shirts. I mean, we were losing tons of money. And we were losing even more than I thought, but it was actually being made up for by our laundromats, the revenue they were generating. What ended up happening is me and really Carla and even Marlene, we drilled down on that business with everything we had for the next 6 to 8 months.
We looked at everywhere where we could cut costs or make our processing faster, more efficient, everything.
We incentivized our processors where they were on hourly pay so that they were incentivized to produce quality, but produce it at a faster pace. We redesigned our routes so that these logistics routes were incredibly efficient and things like that. And it was a long, long drag. And we came out the other side of it, I'd say probably around the 2.5 year mark after launching pickup and delivery. And we, what I call, cracked the code. And it wasn't one day, it was over months.
No.
But we cracked the code.
Our core processors were like, so we're restructuring the way you're being paid again.
This is not an exaggeration.
It's not, it was insane.
And I am not proud of this, but I kept looking at my team and they're working their tails off. And I kept telling them, guys, I am not going to even pretend that I know what I'm doing because I have no idea what I'm doing. All I know is that this business is growing like nobody's business. And if I can figure out how to make money, a profit, because right now I'm losing money, I have to keep making tweaks to our business model and adjusting things until we find that sweet spot. And so literally the way our laundry processors, which were working their tails off, the way they were compensated changed 5 or 6 times over probably a 9-month period of time. And I felt just like the worst person on the planet. Imagine every 6 weeks, you're like, by the way, your entire compensation structure is now this. And then 4 weeks later, you're like, oh, by the way, it's changing again. It's now this. I mean, Marlene is one of the most loyal employees you'll ever find in your life, our general manager. And I thought she was going to kill me. Like, I thought she was going to quit. And
I can't tell these people this.
Yeah. And it's my nature just to be honest with people. I was like, guys, I am going to figure this out, or I'm going to close the business down and sell the trucks, and you're not going to have a job. It's just that simple. There's no other way around it. And so it was a long, intense grind for sure. And it was a lot of work for no reward at all. And we eventually cracked the code and came out the other side of it. And that's essentially the business model that we use today with our pickup and delivery business. And now it's, a very substantial business, and it's very profitable. That really took our 4th store, which was a profitable self-serve laundromat, and it tripled the revenue that we generate out of that store. I wouldn't say in 4 years, because the first couple of years it didn't, but I mean, really in a year or so, cracking the code and figuring out how to do it, incentivizing our employees, creating the right structure, the right management structure, compensation structure, things like that, just shot us straight to the moon. And right around the time that we cracked that code and stopped hemorrhaging money, we had paid off a lot of our debt. And our businesses, all of our businesses, every revenue stream we had was at its highest level ever. We were experiencing record growth in pretty much everything year over year. And so once we stopped hemorrhaging money from our pickup and delivery business and started making money, substantial money, we started looking at how to grow the business some more. And what ended up happening is we ended up applying for a business loan. And as we're filling out our financial paperwork, we look down and we realize our net worth is over $1 million. And we're like,
wow,
wait, what? Because I remember our first SBA loan that we applied for that first laundromat, our net worth was roughly $60,000. And like $45,000 of that was my 401k. But our entire net worth when we bought that first laundromat was $65,000. And we've described the sacrifices we've made, the risk that we've taken. But we woke up one day and it was never even a goal to be quote unquote a millionaire. And quite frankly, never even dreamed it was possible. These are laundromats. I mean, they're little one quarter at a time. And we just woke up one day, and I'll never forget looking at the paperwork. I looked at her. I was like, do you realize we are millionaires? She's like, what?
It's like, I don't feel like a millionaire.
Yeah. She's like, I thought that.
I actually feel like I have money, and
right.
Yeah, I don't.
Yeah. And I mean, obviously the substantial, the majority of our wealth we didn't have $1 million in the bank. It wasn't liquid. It was all tied up in assets and home equity and things like that. But that's really where we kind of had this sort of epiphany, and it didn't change anything in our life. It was just like, wow, I never would have thought I would be a millionaire. Like, I didn't even go to college. I barely graduated from high school. How did I stumble, work my tail off for 8 or 9 years and end up being a millionaire? It's just bizarre. And then shortly after that, I ended up being on a few podcasts that kind of reached out to some people, and you were one of them, and you invited us onto the Laundromat Resource podcast and gave me the opportunity to kind of tell my story, which my intention was behind that wasn't to brag. It was just to inspire people and to point out to the laundromat industry that this industry can change your life and it can change your family tree. It's not just, I can make a little bit of money. And so that was my incentive behind that. And it wasn't on your podcast, but it was on another podcast that I was on telling my story, trying to inspire people. And they referred to me as the Laundromat Millionaire. And I was just like, wait, what? It was true, but I was like, wait, I mean, I knew I was a millionaire, but I mean, I never told anybody that. I wasn't gonna ever tell anybody that. It was just this bizarre situation where I thought about it over the next few days, and they released this podcast, and I had started getting all these inspiring messages from people and things like that. And I felt like I had to make this decision of, do I run from this nickname, which is not a humble nickname? Like, it makes you sound very egotistical and flashy, and which I'm not that way, but she's definitely like,
oh my gosh,
she was
remember
mortified.
him telling me he was going to start this YouTube channel and and this consulting stuff and his business name was going to be Laundromat Millionaire. I was like, no.
You are going You're going to pick any other name on
I'm
the
like,
planet
seriously?
than that. You're not going to use that
That's
name.
what you want to go with? That's kind of like braggy.
Mhm.
And I was like embarrassed for people to know that was his name.
She was, and
Brian.
she's being nice. She was not embarrassed. She was mortified. And she frankly still is mortified. But I'm a business person. Like, that's just how my brain works. And when they refer to me as that, I just had to, I felt like I had to make a decision. Okay, I'm going to run from this, or I'm going to embrace it. And I'm going to embrace it, not look at me, puff my chest out, look how great I am. I had realized through your podcast and through this other one that I got just an insane amount of messages from people telling me how inspiring my story was, and how they had given up on their dreams. And my podcast had literally just given them the incentive to pick themselves back up and start to chase their dream again. And some people had not given up on their dream. They just hadn't accomplished it. And they talked about how motivating it was and how inspiring it was. And I had never really seen myself as that kind of a person, this public figure or whatever. But all I knew is that if telling my story and my journey of poverty to being quote unquote a millionaire, if it inspired 5 people, I was willing to take the heat, the braggadociousness of a brand like Laundromat Millionaire. I just made up that word, by the way. I told you I didn't go to college. Okay? But anyway,
like you're a Laundromat Millionaire, and you just feel like you can make up words now.
Yes, I know.
Say whatever you want. But I just decided that, you know what, I knew I would take some heat, and I knew that even my wife wasn't super comfortable with it. But I knew I had a choice. I could run from it and never bring it up again and pretend like it was never said, or I could embrace it. I don't claim to be a marketing expert, but I've learned a lot about marketing and business over the years. And one of the things I learned is that, you've got to get people's attention. If you got a story to tell and a vision and a brand to build, you have to get people's attention. And there's many ways to do that. But this was a nickname, for lack of a better term, that had been given to me by somebody that, I respected, that was a business owner themselves. And I decided to embrace it. And the reason I decided to embrace it, despite the hate I knew I would get, including from my wife, the reason I decided to embrace it was because ultimately I was more interested in inspiring others to chase their dreams and not give up on their dreams. And if they have given up on their dreams, to dust themselves off, give back up. And I'm a firm believer, if you're still alive and you've given up on whatever your dream is, whether it's business ownership or something else, that's an active decision. You're deciding every minute of every day to give up. It's not a past tense. You haven't given up. You are choosing to give up. And so I decided that I was going to embrace that. And I started a consulting company, which is under the Laundromat Millionaire brand. And I do a lot of consulting, and I teach people about the laundromat industry. A lot of people that are new coming into the industry, try to help them avoid a lot of the common mistakes that happen when you come into the industry.
Well, and to interject here, honestly, I think the consulting side is now where his passion really has just like blossomed for the whole laundromat industry. Because honestly, before he started consulting as an actual side business kind of thing, he's been consulting as he's grown in the business. He's always been talking on the phone to people in other markets, if they found out about him and had questions, or like our distributor would be like, hey, I've got this new person down in Lexington, Kentucky, who's just bought a laundromat. Can you talk to them about how you figured out blah, blah, blah. He's been teaching other people what he's learned along the way before it was a side business. And I think that's where he's really found a passion that he really loves what he's doing, because it's kind of like me leaving auditing for being a teacher, is finding that passion of not just having a business, but having an avenue to help others, to empower others, whether it be with his story or be with his knowledge for someone else getting in a similar business.
Yeah, I'm glad she brought that up, because that's a fantastic point. It's all true. And the reality is that growing up in poverty, you don't have a lot of great mentors. I mean, I had some good people in my life. My parents were good, honest, hardworking people, but they weren't business owners or entrepreneurs. So when I would bring up these crazy idea of owning a business someday, they would try to squash it, intentionally or unintentionally. They just thought I should go to college, get a degree, and become a doctor or whatever. And I just knew that wasn't for me. I wasn't good at school, first of all. And I certainly didn't want to spend another minute in it longer than I had to, but I knew that I was always driven towards entrepreneurship. And so I was always reading, even as a kid, reading anything I could get my hands on business ownership, entrepreneur, personal finance. And I obviously followed that into my adulthood. And there are a ton of people out there that I consider my mentors that I've never met, They don't know me. They've never heard of me, and they probably never will. But they're books that I read and magazine articles that I read and blogs and YouTube videos. So I found myself in this position where I was like, okay, I love this industry. I believe that the laundromat industry is the best small business in America, period, end of story. And I will have that conversation with anybody that wants to discuss it. And I absolutely believe that, not just for Dave Menz, but I believe that it's the best small business in America. And there's many great ones, don't get me wrong. It's not a competition, but I absolutely believe it's the best. And I have a pretty firm belief in that. And so anyone that's interested in the laundromat industry, but even entrepreneurship and business in general, I want to be that person that may never know that person that is somehow inspiring them. And coming back to the Laundromat Millionaire Business Podcast and why we wanted to tell our story up front and be very transparent and open and honest about the good and the bad and the ugly of our journey is that's the story people need to hear. Way too many times people write books and do movies and what have you, and it's all the great stuff and maybe 5 minutes of the bad stuff. And it ends up selling this Hollywood version.
Like overnight success.
Right.
We did not have overnight success.
Yeah. And most people that have achieved any kind of success, and really in life, but especially in business and entrepreneurship, will tell you the same thing. And unfortunately, there's not a lot of us out there that are telling what I consider to be the whole story. And I don't want to detract or demotivate somebody from chasing their dreams. I just want them to know exactly what they're getting involved in. And then if I can be some type of inspiration in a sense of, okay, let's deal with the reality of what business looks like. And then let's figure out a way for you to get this done. Because if you want it bad enough, nothing will stop you. But I also want to tell this story of, yes, we took tremendous risk. We could have been bankrupt for a second time. Absolutely, without a doubt. And that's part of the risk that entrepreneurs take. Typically in life, the greater the risk, if you're successful, typically the greater the reward. And so that's really ultimately what the Laundromat Millionaire Business Podcast is about is, our story. She likes to call it my story because they're my babies. And I'm certainly the passionate one about laundromats and even entrepreneurship and business. But the reality is that she's been there every step of the way. She's an entrepreneur, even though she doesn't consider herself one, in a very different way. But she absolutely is a business owner and an entrepreneur. And part of the reason I wanted her to join me on this journey of this podcast is so that we could inspire people together. And so that she could tell the other side of the story. And she's not as, into business and the industry as I am. And part of the reason I wanted her to be a co-host on this is because she's a huge part of our success. Everybody likes to give me all the credit because I'm the nut job that just decides to do this crazy stuff. But the reality is every decision that I have made, and they have been mostly my decisions, every decision we make, I run by her multiple times. Mm-hmm. And I give her every opportunity to poke holes in my plan. One, because it makes me stronger, but two, because I believe I was born an entrepreneur and a business owner, and she was not. Yeah. And I don't know where other people fall into that category. I just know where we two feel like the way our brains are wired. And you would not believe the value that she brings to our businesses by her brain being wired differently and her looking at everything we're doing through a very different lens.
He gets so excited. It's like that dumpy laundromat that first time. He just gets so excited about the opportunities and the potential. And I'm more of a, let's step back and look at the risk here. Is this, did you think about, did you look at, what about? And so I start questioning it, but I try to maintain a balance of, I don't want to completely deflate all of his enthusiasm. Mm-hmm. But I just tend to look at it with a more critical eye that he tends to eventually get to the critical eye, but it starts out as just woo, excitement.
I do. I go straight to the moon, but I also very much welcome critical thinking with her and with anyone. I mean, the reason I tell my friends these stories and these journeys and my plans, even in private, is because I want that. I want to hear, even with the pickup and delivery stuff, I don't want to hear people tell me that I'm great and I want to do great things. I want to hear them poke holes in things. Mm-hmm. And first of all, if they're right and I can't overcome those things, then you probably saved me a lot of money and grief and headache and stress. But either way, even if you have legitimate points and they can be overcome, now I take that as a personal challenge. Okay, well, that's something I didn't think of. And now I have to figure out a way to overcome that. And if I can, now my business is stronger because of it. And so ultimately what we hope to do with this podcast is to help fellow entrepreneurs and business owners do the same thing. If people haven't listened to our trailer, it's only a couple minutes long. You should check it out. It's kind of fun. But the point of it is that we both passionately believe that business ownership is 80 to 90% all the same thing. It's all very similar skill sets. It's all about integrity, character, hard work, working smarter, not harder. It's about education. It's about sacrifice. It's about risk. And if you want the rewards of those things, you just need to have your eyes open. And then the other part of this podcast we want to do is we really just want to give different perspectives on different business owners and entrepreneurs and their successes and their failures. And so a lot of the people that we'll be talking to and interviewing in these podcasts are not going to be in the laundromat industry. But we believe that a lot of the skills and the traits and the tools and the lessons that they will bring to the podcast, we absolutely believe they're transferable, regardless of your product or service that you offer. We talk all the time about, I do what I do and I tell my story to inspire people. I'm very passionate about the laundromat industry. One of my goals is just to elevate the industry. People say, what does that look like? I don't know. I just want the industry to be better tomorrow than it was yesterday. And I want to play some little part in that by telling my story, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And now with this business podcast, we don't want it to just be about laundromats. We want it to be about entrepreneurship and about business and about life lessons that people from outside the industry can bring that are very practical for people in the laundromat industry, but are also very practical for people that might be listening to the podcast who've never owned a laundromat and never have any desire to own a laundromat, but they are an entrepreneur or they're considering being an entrepreneur. And if we can help them avoid a path that they shouldn't take because they're not meant to take that path by telling the whole story versus just the sexy side of the story, we've still brought good and brought value to their lives. And if we help give people that spur of energy where they need that encouragement to chase their dreams and to understand that this is not a 3-month start a YouTube channel and buy a beach house. Like, this is not a Hollywood movie situation. You better know what you're signing up for. But the beauty of it is if you are the right person or persons and you are meant to do these things, and it's part of what you were put here on earth to do, the value that you can bring to your community by running any business and running it well and serving the community, and the value that you can bring to your family by chasing your dreams and being who you are. I absolutely believe that my family, my kids for sure, but I think it's even probably applies to my wife, the lessons they've seen of me I've always said, I'm not afraid to fail. I don't want to fail, but I'm not afraid to fail. What I'm afraid to do is die and have regrets. Mm-hmm. What I'm afraid to do is leave this earth and say, I didn't do everything I could to put my stamp on it, whatever reason I'm put here. And I believe it's not one singular thing, it's multiple things. But that's really what we hope to bring out of telling our story and creating this podcast and bringing, entrepreneurs and fellow business owners on from all different industries, so we can just all share information and we'll all be better for it.
Yeah. Well, listen, you guys are inspiring. Your story, both sides of it, is very inspiring. And I think eye-opening too, right? Like you said, like we've mentioned already, people need to know what it's going to take to find success. Right. And I think your story it shows what it takes to find success. Now, are there other paths and are there more shortcuts? Yeah, probably. And I think that's part of what you're trying to do. Absolutely. With your podcast and with your consulting and, with your YouTube channel, with everything that you're trying to do is saying, hey, you know what? You learned a lot of the lessons on your own up front because that's what you had to do. Right. But there are other ways to learn those lessons. And namely is by leveraging other people's experiences and other people's wisdom and other people's connections. And that's what this podcast is all about. I know that's what your YouTube is all about. I know that's what you're all about. When you texted me and said that you're starting a podcast, I could not be more excited for it because, number one, I know you guys and I know who you are and what your heart is for other people. And I also know the tenacity that you're going to bring towards helping other people succeed in whatever business that they're doing, right? Or even in life, right? So that got me really excited about it, but also knowing just the depth of your experience and your wisdom in entrepreneurship and also your network in entrepreneurship and what all value that both of those things are going to bring to everybody who listens. I could not be more excited. So I know it's a lot of work to put together a podcast. So thank you for putting the effort and the time into putting this together, for people like me who, need to learn from people like you guys and who want to be inspired by you guys and the people that you're going to have on this podcast. And could not, again, be more honored to be here to hear your story in this episode, or maybe these 2 episodes. Man, I just thank you guys and cannot wait for future episodes.
Thank you for being willing to act as, we asked you to join us on this journey. Obviously we're going to be co-hosting future episodes, but we ask you because we feel like you do a great job of pulling the story out. Sometimes it's hard to tell your own story because you just kind of lose train of thought. And so thank you for being willing to guest host our co-host. I don't even know what it's called. But thank you for helping us tell our story.
Hey,
Because I didn't mention earlier, but I'm in the process of writing a book called Laundromat Millionaire. And it's going to be about my entrepreneurial journey. It's going to dive into a lot of things we just talked about, some more deeply, some more intimately. That'll be coming out in late 2021, depending on when you're watching this. But that's just another way of kind of giving back and hoping to inspire people. But Jordan, ultimately, thanks for being a great friend to us. Thanks for taking the time out of your day. We value your time tremendously. And we appreciate you giving that time up, that sacrifice away from your family to help us, get this launched and get it started and help us to organize our thoughts and tell our story. Thank you so much. We couldn't be more appreciative. And the check's in the mail, by the way.
all right, good. Yeah, remember
you,
double the
Double.
original.
Double the original.
That's right. All right.
Hey,
Thanks,
it's an
man.
honor, guys. Appreciate it.
Thank
We
you.
appreciate it.
Take
All right,
care.
Take care.